"Daddy, sing the song." Her voice was barely a whisper, half asleep, clutching her worn backpack under the office lights that never turned off. Ben Morales glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Another shift, another promise to keep. He dipped the mop back into the bucket, leaned the handle against the wall and began to sing. Soft, untrained, full of life. His voice filled the empty marble hall like a secret that refused to stay hidden. "Someday, baby, we'll see the sun again." Upstairs, behind a wall of glass, Clara Hale, the CEO, froze mid-step. She was supposed to be reviewing numbers. Instead, she found herself staring down at the janitor singing to his daughter beside a mop bucket and a folding chair. The melody rose, cracked, and carried something no spreadsheet ever could: love in survival form. Ben didn't see her watching. He only saw his little girl smile through her tired eyes. When the song ended, the silence felt heavier than sound. Clara wiped her eyes. In that moment, she wasn't the CEO anymore. Just a woman listening to a father love his child louder than the world that overlooked him. By sunrise, the building that had echoed with Ben's song was just another glass tower again. The floors gleamed, the lights hummed, and no one remembered who made it all look perfect. Ben Morales pushed his cleaning cart toward the exit, rubbing the ache in his shoulder. 6 hours of mopping, sweeping, and polishing behind him, then a few hours of sleep before his next job. The night shift badge came off. The delivery driver cap went on. He did it all for one reason. Emma, 8 years old, brown curls that never stayed tied, and a laugh that somehow made every exhaustion feel lighter. Their apartment was small, one bedroom, peeling paint, the hum of the fridge their background music, but it was theirs. Every morning Ben would pack Emma's lunch with mismatched snacks and hum a tune while tying her shoelaces. It was the same melody he once played on guitar for her mother, Maria, a singer who never got to finish her last song. When the accident took her, Ben stopped performing. He sold his instruments, kept only one old mic, the one he used to sing to Maria in the hospital. That's the same mic he used in the lobby now, like a small rebellion against silence. After school, Emma would come to the office with him. She'd do homework at a side desk, or draw little stars on sticky notes for him to find later. "For luck, Daddy." He'd smile, pocket the note, and keep cleaning. Every task, each polished floor, each spotless pane was a way to say, "I'm still trying, love." By midnight, while the city slept, Ben sang for Emma. Not for fame, not for audience, just for her heartbeat to rest easy. Across town, on the top floor of a different world, Clara Hale started her mornings in silence too, but hers was the kind money couldn't fill. CEO of Hale Properties, heiress to a legacy of glass towers and cold efficiency, her father built an empire and left her with a rule book: don't get personal with your people. She followed it well. Her office overlooked the same city Ben cleaned for. Her calendar overflowed, investor calls, board meetings, numbers on screens. But sometimes when the building emptied at night, she'd hear the faint echo of janitors vacuuming downstairs. She never noticed them until last night. Something in that man's voice, raw, imperfect, real, had cracked the walls around her. She couldn't shake it. She'd grown up around pianos, tutors, and choirs, but she hadn't heard a voice that alive in years. The next morning, while her assistant scrolled through reports, Clara kept glancing at the elevator camera feed, wondering if she'd see him again. In her world, people performed for promotions. In his, they sang for survival. 2 lives stacked above each other in the same building, one in marble offices, one in fluorescent corridors, both awake at midnight for completely different reasons, and both somehow deeply lonely. Clara Hale hadn't planned to think about the janitor again, but the song wouldn't leave. It followed her through the morning briefing, through the soft chime of her email alerts, through every conversation that sounded rehearsed. By 10 a.m. she'd given up pretending. She opened the building's internal security system, typed the time, 11:40 p.m., and pressed play. There he was, a man in a faded uniform, singing while his daughter slept against a chair. The microphone cable wound around his wrist like a lifeline. Clara leaned closer to the screen, volume turned low. Every note felt personal, like it belonged to something the company had forgotten to value. She clicked the file info: employee Izan 47-9, Benjamin Morales. Custodial staff, night shift, 5 years of service. No complaints, no raises either. Her throat tightened. At lunch, while her executives discussed quarterly margins, Clara wasn't listening. She kept seeing that little girl's hand reach out mid-song, half awake, trusting that her father's voice meant safety. By late afternoon she made a decision that surprised even her. She took the elevator down, something she hadn't done in years. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and lemon. Ben was there, mopping near the entrance, earbuds in, humming the same tune under his breath. When he noticed her reflection in the glass, he pulled the mop back, startled. "Ma'am, sorry, I didn't know anyone was down here," he said quickly, removing the earbuds. I hope we didn't bother anyone last night. My daughter, she falls asleep better when I sing. I didn't mean to make noise." Clara shook her head. "You weren't a bother." He blinked. "Really? I heard you," she admitted. "It was beautiful." Ben looked confused, almost embarrassed. "It's just something I do for her. Keeps her from feeling alone." Clara hesitated. No script covered this moment. No training on what to say to a man who scrubbed floors and still managed to carry grace in his voice. "What was the song?" He smiled shyly. "Something my wife wrote. She used to sing it when things got hard." There was a pause, the kind that turns strangers into people. "I'm sorry for your loss," Clara said softly. "Thank you." He nodded, eyes lowering. "We get by. Emma's strong." The elevator doors behind her slid open with a polite ding, but she didn't step inside. "If you ever need a quieter space for her to wait, tell security I said." "It's okay. She shouldn't have to fall asleep under flickering lights." Ben blinked, uncertain whether it was real permission or polite sympathy. "That's kind of you, ma'am, but we're fine. Don't want to cause trouble." "No trouble," she said. "Just fairness." Their eyes met for the briefest second, his guarded, hers searching, and in that flicker of understanding something small shifted. As she returned upstairs, the sound of his humming trailed faintly behind her. For years she'd measured success in graphs and charts, but that night's echo, the humankind, stayed louder than all of them. The next few nights, Clara found herself working later than usual. At least, that's what she told her assistant. In truth, she was waiting for the same hour when the building turned quiet, when the elevators stopped chiming, and only the faint hum of cleaning machines moved through the halls. At 11:30 p.m. she'd wander down with a clipboard in hand, pretending to inspect maintenance protocols. The guards learned not to ask questions. Ben never noticed her at first. He'd have his earbuds in, softly singing while mopping near the lobby fountain. Sometimes Emma sat cross-legged beside him, coloring in her notebook, humming along to fragments of the melody. Clara would stand just far enough away to listen without intruding. It became a ritual, her nightly reprieve from the noise of wealth and responsibility. One evening, she broke the pattern. "Your daughter has good pitch," Clara said as she approached. Ben startled, nearly dropping his mop.
"Oh, Miss Hale."
"Didn't see you there." "Clara," she corrected gently. "You can call me Clara." He blinked, unsure if it was a test. "Yes, ma'am. I mean Clara." Emma peeked up from her drawing. "Hi." Clara smiled. "Hi there. What are you working on?" The little girl proudly held up a page covered in blue crayon. "It's Daddy singing in space." "Space?" Clara asked, amused. "Yeah. He says sound can't travel there, but I think love can." Ben sighed. "She's got a big imagination." "She's got poetry," Clara said softly. Emma beamed. Ben tried not to. They talked for a few minutes about songs, about Emma's school, about how the cafeteria pizza could double as shoe soles. Ben was surprised how easy she was to talk to when she wasn't standing behind a boardroom table. Before leaving, Clara asked, "You said your wife wrote that song. Was she a musician?" Ben nodded slowly. "She was a singer. Small gigs, coffee shops, church choirs. She used to say music's what made hard things survivable." "What happened?" He hesitated. "Car accident. 4 years ago. Hit by a drunk driver coming back from a show. Emma was in the back seat. Broke her arm. But she made it." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry." He shrugged the way people do when grief has no new words. "We still sing her songs. Makes her feel close." For a moment the CEO forgot she was supposed to keep her tone neutral. "You should never stop." Ben smiled faintly. "We won't." Over the next week, Clara kept finding reasons to pass through the lobby. Each visit felt less like an inspection and more like a conversation waiting to happen. She learned that Ben once taught music at a community center until it shut down, that he'd pawned his guitar to pay hospital bills, that Emma dreamed of becoming a singer like her mom but was afraid she'd forget her mother's voice, and Ben in return learned that Clara's father used to play piano but had died before she took over the company. She admitted she hadn't touched an instrument since. "Too many memories," she said. "Funny," Ben replied. "That's why I still do." Sometimes she'd stay late enough to help Emma pack her backpack. Once she even brought hot cocoa from the upstairs cafe. Emma called it fancy chocolate, and Clara laughed, a sound that startled even her. Their friendship grew not from grand gestures but from small recognitions. Two people on opposite floors of the same building, both haunted by what they'd lost, both quietly finding their way back to feeling human again. One night as Clara turned to leave, Ben called out, "Ms. Hale, Clara, can I ask something?" "Of course. Why do you keep coming down here? I mean, no disrespect, but people like you don't usually hang around people like me." She looked at him for a long moment. "Because people like you remind people like me what's real." He didn't know what to say. He just nodded quietly, as Emma's soft hum filled the space between them. When Clara finally stepped into the elevator, she looked back once more. The janitor was still singing. His daughter was still smiling. And for the first time in years, Clara didn't feel like she was running a company. She felt like she was part of something alive. It started with a photo. A security guard, trying to impress someone on social media, posted a picture of the lobby at midnight, polished floors, reflections like glass. In the corner of the frame, a small girl could be seen asleep beside a cleaning cart. The caption read, "Some people never go home." By morning, the post had reached the wrong inbox. At 8:45 a.m., HR manager Todd Weller stood in front of Ben's locker, holding a printed screenshot. His tone was the kind of polite that cut. "Care to explain this, Morales?" Ben blinked, setting down his mop bucket. "That's my daughter. She waits for me sometimes after school. Only until I finish." Todd raised a brow. "Do you understand the liability risk here? A child, unsupervised on corporate property after hours. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." "She's supervised," Ben said quietly. "By me." "That's not the point. Company policy clearly states." "I know what it states," Ben interrupted, trying to stay calm. "It also says we're a family-first workplace." "I didn't think that meant unless you're the janitor." Several other employees had stopped to listen. Maintenance workers, security staff. The silence made the air heavy. Todd's voice rose. "This isn't about class, Morales. It's about professionalism. It's about compassion," Ben replied before he could stop himself. "I can't afford a babysitter every night. My daughter sits quietly while I work. I don't see the harm," Todd snapped, "is you breaking rules that exist for a reason." Ben's knuckles whitened around the mop handle. "Rules that make it easier to forget people like me exist." Todd's face reddened. "Watch your tone." That's when the elevator doors opened. Clara Hale stepped out. She hadn't planned to. She'd come down only to drop off a file for facilities, but the sound of Todd's voice carried. "What's going on here?" she asked. The room stiffened. Todd straightened like a student caught talking in class. Ms. Hale, we're just addressing a minor policy issue." Clara's eyes flicked to Ben. "Define minor." "Mr. Morales has been bringing his daughter into the building after hours. It's against code, a potential liability and a distraction to operations." Clara turned to Ben. "Is that true?" Ben hesitated. "Yes, ma'am. I bring her sometimes. She does homework while I finish up. I make sure she's safe." "Any incidents?" Clara asked Todd. "No, but that's not the point." "Then what is the point?" she cut in. Todd blinked. "Well, policy. Policies are supposed to protect people, not punish them for trying to be good fathers." Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The room went silent. Even the hum of the cleaning machine seemed to stop. Ben lowered his eyes. "Ma'am, please. I don't want to cause trouble. I'll stop bringing her." Clara shook her head slightly. "You shouldn't have to choose between your job and your daughter, Mr. Morales." Todd cleared his throat. "With respect, Ms. Hale, we have to apply the same standards to everyone. Exceptions create precedents. If we bend rules for him, then maybe the rule needs bending," she said. That single sentence spread through the staff like electricity. For a moment, the janitor wasn't alone. Someone with power had said what they'd all been too afraid to. By the time Clara reached her office upstairs, 3 emails were waiting. All from board members. Lobby incident. Need clarification on your position regarding facility staff. PR optics risk recommend distance. In the boardroom later that afternoon, the tension was visible. "We understand your compassion," said Director Latham, tapping his pen, "but this company runs on consistency. If the CEO is seen defending an employee who breaks policy, it undermines authority." Clara kept her tone neutral. "He wasn't breaking policy, he was being a father." "That's not the headline that will run if this leaks," Latham replied. "You'll look emotional, unprofessional." Maybe emotions overdue here, she said. A few faces twitched, discomfort, not agreement. Another director spoke up. You can't attach personal feelings to HR cases. You're running a corporation, not a charity. Clara folded her hands. My father built this company on human values, not fear of headlines. I'm not punishing a man for loving his child. The silence stretched. Finally Latham sighed. Just be aware, Clara. If this comes back to bite us, the board won't take responsibility. Noted, she said flatly. Downstairs that night, Ben cleaned slower than usual. The same marble floors that once reflected hope now felt like ice. He'd heard from another worker that HR might still write him up, a formal warning. One more, and he could lose his job. When Clara appeared in the lobby again, he didn't look up. You shouldn't have done that, he said quietly. Done what? Stood up for me. Now they'll think you're biased. Let them, she said. He glanced at her, tired eyes softening. Why do you care, Clara? I'm just the guy with a mop. She shook her head. No, you're the guy who remembers what this place forgot, that people matter more than policy. For a second, neither spoke. Then Emma's laughter broke the silence. She was sitting on the floor, tapping a pen against her notebook, humming that same tune. Clara smiled faintly. Seems the world still sounds right when she's around. Ben looked at his daughter, then at her. Yeah, he said. For now. The mop bucket squeaked softly as he pushed it forward again. A quiet rhythm of defiance, one floor at a time. The next morning, Clara couldn't focus. The argument in the lobby replayed in her head. Todd's tone, Ben's quiet restraint, Emma's small voice echoing through the hall. By noon she was scrolling through the company archives, looking for something she couldn't quite name. Proof, maybe, that compassion still had a place here. The internal database stretched back 20 years. Most files were financial reports, acquisition deals, press releases, but then a name caught her eye, tucked between legal memos and old HR audits. The Hale Foundation for Employee Arts Pilot Program. Her father's name was on it. Clara frowned, opening the document. The header showed a faded logo, a treble clef, wrapped in a pair of hands. The description: an initiative to support creative talents among lower-wage employees, providing free art, music and writing workshops after hours. There were names listed under participants. Her eyes stopped halfway down. Benjamin Morales, music mentor, part-time. Her breath caught. Scrolling further, she found a black and white photo, a younger Ben, clean-shaven, smiling in front of a piano, surrounded by warehouse staff holding guitars and notebooks. His posture was confident, the look of a man doing what he loved. Beneath it, her father's handwritten note. Ben Morales shows real leadership potential. Keep an eye on him. Clara leaned back in her chair. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Her father had seen something in him. She dug deeper, opening linked memos. One from HR, dated 6 months later. Due to budget restructuring, the Hale Foundation program will be suspended indefinitely, funding redirected to PR outreach initiatives. And another, final one, 2 weeks before her father's death. Ensure all participating staff are reassigned or compensated. Ben Morales to be notified personally. But there was no follow-up entry, no signature, no confirmation. He'd fallen through the cracks. That evening, Clara stayed late again. The lobby was quiet except for the squeak of wheels and the rhythm of the mop. The same nightly symphony she'd grown to find strangely comforting. Ben looked up when she approached. You're here again. I am, she said, hesitating. I found something today. He straightened, cautious. Should I be worried? She smiled faintly. Not this time. She handed him a printed page, the photo from the archive. Ben's eyes widened. Where did you get this? Our company records. You used to work for my father. His face softened with disbelief. Your father was Henry Hale? She nodded. You were part of his employee arts program. Ben laughed quietly, a sound half fondness, half ache. Yeah, for a while. It was the best thing that ever happened here. He'd walk into the room like we were equals, not workers. He said music made better people and better people made better companies. Clara's throat tightened. He never told me that. Ben looked down at the paper again, running a finger along the faded edges. When he passed, they shut it all down. Said there wasn't room in the budget for hobbies. I lost the teaching job, went back to cleaning to stay close to the building that once felt alive. The words hit her harder than she expected. Her father's vision, something human, hopeful, had died with him, and she'd been too busy climbing the corporate ladder to notice. She swallowed. You shouldn't have been forgotten. Ben smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Happens more often than you think. Not anymore, Clara said quietly. Not while I'm here. He looked at her, wary but curious. You can't fight the whole system, Clara. Maybe not. But I can start by fixing what it broke. Later that night, back in her office, Clara opened the Foundation's old logo file, the treble clef, in hands. She traced the outline on her screen like it was her father's handwriting. Then she opened a blank document and began typing. Proposal. Reinstatement of the Hale Foundation for Employee Arts. The first sentence read, a company that forgets its people's voices eventually stops hearing its own. She sat there staring at the words, her reflection faint in the glass. Somewhere below, Ben was probably singing again, not for attention, not for praise, just for love. For the first time in years, Clara felt her father would have been proud of her. The email arrived before sunrise. Subject: Employment Review. Immediate action required. Ben read it twice, certain it was a mistake. HR had never emailed him directly before. By 7:00 a.m. he was sitting in the same conference room where executives discussed bonuses, only now it smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear. Todd Weller from HR was there. So was a woman from legal, someone Ben had never met. A folder sat between them, his name printed neatly on the tab. Mr. Morales, Todd began, voice smooth and distant. This isn't easy. The board has reviewed the situation regarding your daughter's presence in the building and the social media exposure that followed. After consideration, we've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately. Ben froze. Terminate? It's not personal, Todd said quickly. This is about liability. A minor being repeatedly brought into a restricted area puts the company at risk. We can't afford that kind of publicity. Ben's throat tightened. You mean the kind of publicity that shows a father trying to do right by his kid? Mr. Morales, the legal representative interrupted. You violated clear workplace policy. We appreciate your years of service, but we have to protect the company's image. He looked at them both. What about protecting people? Neither answered. Todd just slid the paper toward him. Termination agreement. No severance. Ben didn't sign. He just stared at the page until the letters blurred. I'll clean out my locker, he said finally. In the lobby, the morning light poured through the tall windows. The same place where he'd once sung lullabies. Now every sound felt louder. The squeak of wheels, the buzz of phones, the echo of people pretending not to notice him. Emma sat on the chair where she always waited after school, swinging her legs. She looked up and smiled. Hi, Daddy. You're early. He knelt beside her, forcing a smile. Hey, kiddo. Are we going home already?
Yeah.
He swallowed hard. We'll sing somewhere else tonight. She tilted her head. Why? Did they fix the lights? He almost laughed at that. The kind of laugh that breaks before it begins. Something like that. He packed his cleaning supplies into a small box. Gloves, his badge, a worn-out microphone. Each piece felt heavier than it should. By the time he reached the door, security had already deactivated his keycard. The soft red blink on the scanner felt like a final insult. Upstairs, Clara Hale's phone buzzed with 3 urgent messages before her first coffee. HR completed the Morales termination. Please prepare statement if asked. Board consensus necessary containment. Containment. That's what they called firing a man who sang to his daughter. She slammed her laptop shut and headed for HR. Todd looked up as she entered. Ms. Hale, if this is about Morales. It is. We followed protocol. Protocol, she repeated. You mean punishing decency? Todd sighed, visibly uncomfortable. We couldn't risk more exposure. The post was circulating again last night. Some blogs are calling it the singing janitor scandal. PR insisted we act before it escalates. Clara stepped closer. So instead of defending him, you gave the internet exactly what it wants. A villain. Us. That's not fair, Miss Hale. No, she said sharply. It's not. She left before her anger could break through her voice. That afternoon she found Ben in the parking lot, a cardboard box on the ground beside him. He was quiet, staring at the badge in his hand like it belonged to someone else. They fired you, she said softly. He nodded, said I was a liability. Her jaw tightened. I tried to stop it. The board. He held up a hand. Don't. It's not your fault. It is, she said. I run this place. If my word doesn't matter, what does that say about me? It says you still have a heart, he answered. That's more than most people up there. She tried to smile. but the weight in her chest made it impossible. "Where will you go?" "Anywhere that lets me keep my dignity," he said quietly. Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Bye, Miss Clara." Clara crouched down. "Goodbye, sweetheart. Keep singing for your dad, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Always." Ben lifted the box into the back of his car. For a moment, he hesitated, then placed the microphone on the dashboard like a reminder of what couldn't be taken. Before closing the door, he looked back at her. "You once asked why I still sing. It's because silence doesn't change anything. At least sound tries." Then he drove away, taillights fading into the morning traffic. That night, Clara sat alone in her office, staring at the city. Below her, thousands of windows glowed, each a life she'd never seen. The board's words rang in her head. Liability, containment, professionalism. She pulled up the archived photo again. Ben teaching in that old program, her father's handwriting below it. "Keep an eye on him," she whispered into the empty room. "I did. Too late." Her reflection stared back from the glass, powerful, polished, hollow. For the first time, Clara realized how powerless power could feel. Somewhere in the distance she imagined a voice, faint, warm, defiant, carrying through the night. "Someday, baby, we'll see the sun again." And this time she cried not because of the song but because of the silence that followed. It started with a 15-second clip. No one knew who uploaded it first. A night guard maybe, or a delivery driver passing through the lobby. The video showed a janitor in a blue uniform, singing to a little girl who had fallen asleep beside his cart. His voice was raw, cracked from exhaustion, but soft in a way that reached through the screen. The caption read, "Single dad janitor sings to his daughter after shift." He was fired for this. Within hours it spread like wildfire. By morning, the clip had over 200,000 views. By noon, it was on news sites, reposted with hashtags that multiplied by the minute. "The singing janitor. Justice for Ben. Let him sing." People didn't just watch, they felt. Comments poured in. "This broke me. He's what humanity looks like." "This company fired a father for loving his kid. Boycott them." Celebrities retweeted it. Local radio played the song on air. Music teachers, single parents and strangers from across the world began sharing videos of themselves singing the same lullaby. A wave of solidarity called the Ben Challenge. By that evening, the company's PR inbox was buried under thousands of angry messages. Headlines: "Corporate giant fires janitor for singing to daughter." "Hard over policy." "The video that's making CEOs sweat." The board panicked. In her corner office, Clara scrolled through the video for the 100th time. There he was, Ben, head bowed, singing through fatigue. Emma curled in a chair, trusting the sound to keep her safe. Every frame hurt. She muted her phone and replayed it again. Her reflection stared back at her in the screen. Not the CEO, not the decision-maker, just the woman who had failed to protect the only person who'd reminded her of her father's legacy. A knock at the door pulled her back. It was Todd from HR, pale and sweating. "Miss Hale, the situation's escalating." "How bad?" "We're trending globally. News outlets are calling. Reporters are outside. The board's demanding a statement by end of day." Clara's voice was steady. "Draft 1. Todd blinked. "You'll review it?" "No," she said, standing. "I'll write it myself." By mid-afternoon, the company lobby was surrounded by cameras. Employees whispered in corners, scrolling through headlines as if reading about someone else's life. A reporter shouted through the glass doors, "Ms. Hale, is it true you personally defended the janitor before he was terminated?" Clara didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she called a meeting with the board. When she entered the conference room, their faces told her everything. Nervous, defensive, calculating. Latham spoke first. "We need containment. Clara, we can't appear reactive. If we admit fault, investors panic." Clara dropped her phone onto the table. The video played again, the faint echo of Ben's voice filling the sterile space. "This," she said quietly, "is what we're really afraid of. A father singing." "Optics matter," one director muttered. "So does decency," Clara shot back. "We followed procedure," another insisted. "And in doing so," she said, "we betrayed everything my father built." They stared at her, some embarrassed, others just annoyed. "This isn't about PR anymore," she continued. "It's about integrity. We have to make it right, publicly." "You mean a statement?" "No," Clara said. "I mean a reckoning." That evening she found Ben's number through payroll records and called. He didn't pick up. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. The third time, he answered, tired, wary. "Miss Hale." "Clara," she corrected softly. Ben, I'm sorry. Silence. Then, for what? For letting them fire me, or for realizing too late that I'm a person? She winced. Both. I don't need an apology, he said. I need to feed my kid. I know, she whispered. But this story's not over yet. He laughed bitterly. It is for me. The internet forgets fast. Maybe, she said, but I won't. By nightfall, the clip had crossed 5 million views. News anchors were quoting Emma's line from the drawing. Sound can't travel in space, but love can. People printed it on shirts. For the first time, Clara saw hope hiding inside chaos. She stayed in her office long after everyone left, scrolling through messages from strangers, teachers offering to fund Emma's music lessons, musicians wanting to record Ben's song, families sharing stories of their own sacrifices. Every comment repeated the same truth her father once preached, that kindness, when seen, changes everything. Clara turned off the lights and stood by the window, city glowing beneath her. Somewhere out there, Ben and Emma were watching the same storm unfold from their small apartment. The world had finally seen them. And now, it was watching her. She knew what she had to do next. Not a press release, not a quiet settlement, but something that would make her father proud and remind the company that Hart was still its greatest asset. Tomorrow, she wouldn't just speak as a CEO. She would speak as a human being who finally listened. The ballroom shimmered under chandelier light, crystal, flawless, cold. It was the company's annual investor gala, the crown jewel of Hale Properties' calendar, rows of polished tables, cameras flashing, champagne flowing, the kind of event where smiles were scripted and emotions were liabilities. Clara Hale stood behind the curtain, hands trembling against her note cards. The teleprompter scrolled her speech in perfect order. Revenue growth, expansion targets, new developments, every line immaculate, every word meaningless. Her assistant whispered, "You're up in 30 seconds, ma'am." She nodded, but her mind was somewhere else, in a quiet lobby, where a father once sang to his daughter, and the world listened. When she stepped onto the stage, polite applause filled the air. She smiled, professional and distant. Cameras pivoted toward her, flashes painted her face in white light. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "Tonight, we celebrate progress, innovation and the future of Hale Properties." She paused. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the giant LED screen behind her, the picture of success. But she couldn't continue. Not like this. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The room blurred. Then she exhaled, set her note cards aside and looked directly into the audience. "There's something I need to say," she began quietly. Murmurs rippled through the room. A few executives exchanged glances. The teleprompter froze, confused. "I was supposed to tell you about profits," she said, "about growth charts and percentages. But none of that matters right now." She turned toward the massive screen. "What matters," she said, "is this." With a single tap on her remote, the ballroom lights dimmed. The screen flickered, and there he was, Ben Morales, pushing his cart through the lobby, singing softly to a sleeping little girl. The audience fell silent. The sound filled the room, raw, fragile, human. "Hush now, little star, the night won't last forever." No music, no polish, just a tired man's voice carrying love through fluorescent light. When the video ended, no one moved. Not a fork, not a cough, not even a breath. Clara stepped forward again. "That man," she said, her voice breaking, "was one of ours." She let the words hang, heavy. "His name is Ben Morales, a janitor, a single father, a man who worked 2 jobs, who sang not for praise but for hope. And we, this company, my company, fired him." The silence deepened, then turned electric. Cameras tilted forward, investors whispered. Clara continued, "When that video went viral, I told myself I'd handle it privately. But the truth is, what happened wasn't a PR mistake. It was a moral one, because somewhere along the way we forgot what this company was built for." She gestured toward the wall of portraits, her father's among them. "My father believed in people. He believed that if you gave ordinary workers a chance to dream, they'd build extraordinary things. He created something called the Hale Foundation for Employee Arts. It was supposed to remind us that creativity doesn't belong only to the top floor, that humanity doesn't clock out at 5 p.m. Her eyes glistened. That foundation died when he did, and with it a part of who we were. She took a deep breath, but someone reminded me. A spotlight shifted to the side entrance where Ben Morales now stood, stunned, holding his daughter's hand. The crowd gasped. "I invited him here tonight," Clara said softly, Because he deserves to stand in the light he gave us. Ben froze. He hadn't agreed to this. Cameras swiveled toward him. Emma clung to his arm. "Miss Hale," he began. "Clara," she corrected, stepping down from the stage. "Please, come up." Applause started hesitantly, then grew. Clara extended her hand. Ben hesitated, then took it. His rough palm met hers. Worker and CEO, opposite ends of a broken bridge, reconnecting at last. On stage she turned to the audience. "Effective immediately," she declared. "Ben Morales is reinstated with full honors and back pay." The crowd erupted. But she wasn't done. She turned to Ben, smiling through tears. "And as of tonight, we're creating something new, the Morales Family Arts and Compassion Fund. A permanent program that will provide childcare support after hours, creative recos, and scholarships for employees' children, including one named for this young lady." She knelt beside Emma. "The Emma Morales Music Grant." Emma's eyes widened. "For me?" "For you," Clara said, voice trembling. "And for every child who needs a song to believe in." The applause rose again, this time thunderous, genuine. Ben turned toward her, eyes wet. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," Clara whispered. "Because you showed me what leadership really looks like, showing up when it's hardest, and singing even when no one listens." She motioned to the backstage area. A single spotlight came on, a microphone, waiting. "Would you sing it for us? The same song?" Ben blinked, overwhelmed. "Here." Clara nodded. "Here." The audience stilled again. Cameras adjusted. Ben looked at Emma, who nodded eagerly. He stepped to the mic, hands trembling. The lights softened. The room dimmed. And then the first note. Low. Honest. Beautiful. "Hush now, little star." The room melted into silence. No one ate. No one whispered. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Halfway through the song, Clara quietly stepped beside him. Her voice was shaky at first, then steadier, fragile harmony weaving into his melody. "The night won't last forever, someday you'll see the sun." When their voices met, something broke open, a release years in the making. The audience rose to their feet, tears on faces that had never shown vulnerability in public before. As the last note faded, the applause was not polite. It was grateful, standing. And Clara turned to Ben, voice barely audible over the noise. "You gave us back our humanity." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "You just remembered you had it." They hugged, awkward and pure, and for once the cameras captured something real. The rest of the night blurred, reporters shouting, investors shaking hands, employees crying, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the feeling that lingered long after the lights dimmed, the realization that a janitor's song had rewritten the story of an empire. Somewhere in the balcony, Emma sat with her feet swinging, whispering the final line softly to herself. "Someday, Daddy, we'll see the sun again." And this time, it wasn't a lullaby. It was a promise kept. Weeks passed. The frenzy quieted. The hashtags faded from the trending lists. The cameras moved on, and the city returned to its usual rhythm, except inside Hale Tower where something had changed. The once sterile lobby now held laughter. Where polished marble had echoed footsteps, it now carried the soft hum of a guitar, and at its center stood Ben Morales, no longer in a janitor's uniform, but in a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by children coloring on the floor. A small sign on the wall read, "Hale Community Arts Program Director Benjamin Morales." Every afternoon, the building that once silenced music now filled with it. Employees dropped by after work to hear their kids sing, paint, or act in small plays written on printer paper. Secretaries stayed late just to help clean up after the sessions. Even security guards leaned on their posts longer than usual, smiling. Ben's days were still long, but they were full in a different way. No more time clocks or reprimands, just moments that mattered. He taught the children how to find rhythm in noise, how to listen before they spoke. Music, he'd tell them, isn't about perfect notes, it's about breathing together. And sometimes when the class ended, Emma would run up, whispering, "Dad, let's do the second song." That was their new ritual, the one they'd written together. A duet of promise and peace, the sound of starting over. Clara Hale stood in the doorway most evenings, watching quietly. No speeches, no cameras, just a small smile and a paper cup of coffee that always went cold before she finished it. "Miss Clara," Emma waved, her hair messy, her cheeks flushed. "You came. Wouldn't miss it," Clara said, kneeling to Emma's level. "You were wonderful." Emma grinned. "I messed up the last line." "That's what makes it perfect," Clara said. Ben turned from the whiteboard, chuckling. "You're spoiling her." Maybe, Clara replied softly. But she deserves it. There was an ease between them now, the kind that didn't need to be defined. It was friendship, respect, and something gentler underneath. Sometimes they talked after the kids left about everything except the viral video. About Maria's songs, about Clara's father, about how both of them had learned in different ways to live with ghosts and gratitude at the same time. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Ben said quietly, "You know, I used to hate this building. It felt like a reminder of everything I lost. And now?" He smiled. "Now it feels like something I helped build." Clara looked around at the drawings taped to glass walls, the laughter echoing down the halls, the faint scent of acrylic paint where once there had been nothing but disinfectant. "You did more than build it," she said. "You gave it a heartbeat." The next week, Hale Properties held its first community open night. Employees and families filled the lobby, watching their children perform songs and skits under fairy lights strung between marble columns. The final act was Emma and her father. Ben took the mic, looked at the crowd and then at Clara. "This one's called The Second Song," he said. "It's for everyone who forgot they could still sing." The melody began soft, playful, hopeful. Emma's voice joined his pure, untrained, beautiful. We walked through silence, thinking it was peace. But real peace sounds like someone waiting for you. The lyrics spoke of healing, of second chances, of broken things that still worked if handled with care. Clara felt her eyes sting. Around her even the executives had softened. The same men who once voted to fire him were now swaying quietly, hands over their hearts. When the song ended, the applause wasn't loud, it was long. The kind that comes from people who've remembered what gratitude feels like. Later, after everyone left, Clara helped Ben stack chairs while Emma drew stars on a banner that read, "Thank you, Miss Clara."
"You don't have to stay," Ben said.
"I want to," she replied. "Besides, I owe you more folding chairs than I can count." He laughed, shaking his head. "I think we're even now." "No," she said gently. "You rebuilt my father's dream. You gave it breath again." He looked at her, really looked. Maybe we both did. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the building, no longer sterile, no longer cold, the kind of silence that meant peace, not absence. Outside, the city glowed. Ben locked the doors, Emma asleep in his arms. Clara walked beside him to the parking lot, the night air soft with spring. At the car, Ben turned. "You ever think about the first night we met?"
"All the time," she said.
"You apologized for being loud." He smiled. "And you thanked me." "That's still the best thing I ever did," she whispered. For a second, the air between them felt heavy again, not sad, just full. Then Emma stirred, and the moment passed gently, like a note resolving at the end of a song. "Good night, Miss Clara," Emma murmured sleepily. "Good night, sweetheart." Clara watched as Ben buckled her in, waved, and drove away. The taillights disappeared around the corner, leaving the reflection of city lights on her car door. She stood there for a long time before whispering, almost to herself, "The second song, it's not about singing again. It's about remembering why you sang in the first place." And for the first time in years, Clara hummed her father's favorite tune all the way home. 1 year later, the building that once silenced a song was hosting a concert. The banners above the entrance read, "Hale Foundation Annual Charity Gala, in support of the Morales Family Arts and Compassion Fund." Inside, the same ballroom that once echoed with polite speeches and corporate applause now shimmered with fairy lights and music stands. There were no suits tonight, no stiff protocol, just families, employees and children in mismatched outfits holding violins and sheet music. The air buzzed with something richer than wealth, warmth. Clara Hale stood near the stage, hands clasped together, eyes bright with quiet disbelief. A year ago, this room had been the site of confession and redemption. Tonight, it was celebration. She turned as the lights dimmed and the MC's voice echoed through the speakers. "Please welcome our first scholarship recipient, Miss Emma Morales." The crowd erupted in applause. Emma stepped onto the stage, small and composed, her curls tied back with a blue ribbon. She was wearing a simple white dress, and a microphone headset slightly too big for her face. But when she smiled, the room softened. At the edge of the stage sat Ben, guitar on his knee, that same old mic beside him, cleaned, repaired, kept like a relic of where it all began. He caught his daughter's nervous glance and whispered, "Just like home, okay?" Emma nodded, took a deep breath and faced the crowd. "Good evening," she said, her voice small but steady. "This song is for my mom, who taught me what music feels like, and for my dad, who taught me what courage sounds like." Ben blinked fast, trying not to show how much that line hit him. The room stilled. Clara pressed a hand to her heart. And then Emma began to sing. Once the world was quiet, and hearts forgot their tune. But one small voice kept singing, and the stars remembered soon. Her voice was light, pure and untrained, but it filled every corner of the hall. Halfway through the verse, Ben joined in with the guitar, soft, finger-picked notes, carrying her higher. The melody intertwined like conversation, the echo of their nightly songs now reborn in public, not as defiance but as hope. Behind them, a screen displayed old photos, the first community art classes, the employees' children painting, the reopening of the foundation, laughter, color, humanity. And in the front row, Clara's eyes never left them. When the final note faded, the silence that followed wasn't absence, it was reverence. Then the applause began. It wasn't thunderous this time. It was tender, the kind that comes from people remembering something sacred. Ben stood, bowed slightly and gestured toward Emma. She giggled, hiding behind his arm. Clara was already standing, leading the ovation. Afterward, the crowd gathered around in small groups. Employees, artists, parents, all talking, laughing, reconnecting. Clara approached the stage as Ben packed up his guitar. "You didn't warn me she'd steal the whole show," Clara said, smiling. Ben grinned. "She gets that from her mother." Emma ran up, clutching a small certificate. "Miss Clara, look, it's real. My name's on it." Clara knelt, her voice thick with pride. "You earned every letter, sweetheart. Your mom would be proud." "She is," Emma said matter-of-factly. "She hears us when we sing." Ben's eyes softened. "She does." Clara straightened, meeting his gaze. "You've built something incredible here." He shrugged modestly. "We all did. You gave it the roof. The people gave it the song." They stood in the soft hum of post-performance chatter, that rare moment when joy lingers longer than noise. Later that night, after the guests left, Clara wandered through the empty hall. The stage lights glowed dimly, casting gold across rows of folded chairs. She sat on the edge of the stage, looking out, imagining her father somewhere in the crowd, smiling. Ben joined her, still in his rolled-up sleeves, guitar case over one shoulder. "Long day," he said. "Best one in years," she answered. "You know, I think he'd be proud." "Your father?" "Both of them," she said softly. "Yours and mine." He smiled at that, resting the guitar beside him. "You saved a lot of people, Clara." She shook her head. "No. You reminded us we were worth saving." The silence between them felt peaceful now, not empty. The kind of silence music rests on. As they locked up, Clara paused at the doorway, looking back at the hall one last time. A year ago, this same room had been filled with guilt and apology. Now, it pulsed with legacy. Where once there had been corporate slogans, there were hand-painted banners reading "Every voice matters." Where once there was fear of imperfection, there was laughter echoing off walls. And where once a single father sang in the dark, now a generation of children were learning to find their own light. Outside, the night was calm. Ben loaded his guitar into the back seat while Emma leaned against Clara's side, half asleep. "Miss Clara," she murmured, "will you come hear my next song too?" Clara smiled, every one of them. Emma smiled, eyes closing. As Ben drove away, Clara stood under the soft glow of the streetlight, the hum of the city blending with faint echoes of the evening's music. For the first time in her life, she felt like the business she inherited had finally become the purpose she believed in. And in that quiet moment, she whispered to the empty air, "The music of tomorrow doesn't start on a stage. It starts wherever kindness is brave enough to be heard." The sound of the car faded down the street, leaving behind only the faintest memory of a melody, the one that had changed everything. Sometimes the songs that save us aren't written for crowds. They're sung in empty halls, in quiet nights, in moments no one was supposed to see. But when the world does see, it listens. Because one act of courage, one note of kindness, can echo far beyond its walls. And that echo, that music, becomes tomorrow. Soft fade. Logo appears, inspired by true acts of courage. Subscribe for more stories that sing humanity back to life. Voiceover. One song in an empty hall reminded a company that people aren't prophets, they're stories. That every voice we ignore leaves silence behind. And every act of kindness we choose to see becomes music. Ben didn't change the world with a speech, or a lawsuit, or a revolution. He changed it with a lullaby. A father's promise whispered in fluorescent light. Proof that love, when seen, can rewrite everything. Maybe that's the lesson we keep forgetting in our noise. That dignity doesn't need a stage. That courage doesn't need applause. That sometimes, all it takes to heal a room is one honest voice refusing to go quiet. Pause. Faint guitar strings join, echoing the earlier lullaby theme. They say sound fades fast, that it vanishes the moment it's made. But I think some sounds stay. They live in the walls, in the air, in the hearts of people who needed to hear them. That night when Ben sang, the building remembered what it was built for. Not transactions, not numbers, but connection. It remembered that behind every title and badge and paycheck, there's a story waiting to be heard. And in that moment, even marble learned how to listen. Soft background shift, distant applause from Emma's performance blends faintly into the score. A year later, the hall still hums with his song. Children sing where silence once lived. A father rests, knowing his voice built more than walls. It built bridges. And somewhere, a young girl named Emma is learning that music can do more than fill space. It can heal it. Clara sits in the front row sometimes, not as a CEO but as a listener. Because in the end, leadership wasn't about being heard. It was about hearing others. Voiceover tone softens, more personal. Maybe you've had your own version of that empty hall, a place where your voice felt too small to matter. Maybe you've been told to quiet down, to stay invisible, to keep your light hidden because the world isn't ready for it. But maybe tonight you'll remember Ben, a single father who sang anyway. And maybe you'll remember that your sound, whatever it is, deserves to be heard. Piano swells gently. The tone turns intimate, like a whisper across distance. So, here's a question. If you could dedicate one song to someone you love, what would it be? Drop it in the comments. Let the world see the sound you'd give. And tell us where you're listening from. Because even across oceans, even across time zones, we're all part of the same melody. Different notes, same song. The music grows warmer, almost glowing now, strings joining, harmonizing softly with the piano. Voiceover, final reflection. Stories like this remind us that the smallest acts can echo the loudest, that empathy is louder than policy, and that when compassion takes the microphone, the whole world leans in. So if this story found you, if it reminded you of something you've lost or something you still believe in, take a breath and share your light. Because somewhere, someone is sitting in their own quiet room waiting to hear the sound that heals theirs. Long pause, then a single guitar note echoes. The same lullaby chord from section 9. Voiceover whisper. Don't underestimate your small song. The world's still listening. Opening reflection. The reminder in an empty hall. Voiceover. One song in an empty hall reminded a company that people aren't prophets. They're stories. That every voice we silence leaves a scar on something unseen. And every act of kindness we choose to witness becomes music that never fades. Ben Morales didn't change the world with money or power. He didn't have either. He changed it with a lullaby, a father's promise carried through fluorescent light. A song meant for one little girl that somehow reached millions. Gentle pause, piano breathes. Maybe that's what we keep forgetting in our rush to matter. That dignity doesn't need a stage. That courage doesn't need applause. That sometimes the loudest thing you can do is simply refuse to go quiet. Memory loop. The song that stayed. They say sound fades fast, that it vanishes the moment it's made. But some sounds stay. They linger. They live in the walls of the rooms that first heard them, in the air that carried them, in the hearts of the people who needed to hear them most. That night when Ben sang, the building remembered what it had forgotten, that it was built not just to hold meetings and contracts, but to hold people, not for transactions, but for connection. And for the first time in years, the marble itself seemed to listen. Soft guitar joins, slow 6/8 rhythm, echo of a lullaby beat. Because sometimes, you don't rebuild a company by rewriting its rules. You rebuild it by reopening its heart. 1 year later, the hall that breathes. A year later, that same hall hums differently. Children's laughter drifts through the glass. Music classes echo down corridors that once silenced every note. The janitor who used to sweep dust from the corners now sweeps fear out of people's hearts. He teaches others what his daughter already knew, that every person carries a song, even if the world has never heard it. And somewhere near the front row, Clara Hale sits quietly, not as a CEO, not as a headline, but as a listener. Because leadership, she learned, was never about being heard.
It was about hearing others.
Small pause, distant applause fades in, as if remembering the gala. Emma performs on that same stage now. Her small voice steady, her father beside her. And every note she sings feels like forgiveness. For the company that forgot, For the city that watched, for the world that stayed silent too long. Universal mirror. Our own quiet rooms. A voiceover. Soft. Personal. Maybe you've had your own version of that empty hall. A place where your voice felt too small to matter. Where you sang quietly, hoping no one would hear you. Because being ignored sometimes hurts less than being noticed and misunderstood. Maybe you've been told to stay invisible, to keep your kindness private because it's unrealistic, to hide your light because it makes others uncomfortable. But maybe tonight you'll remember Ben. A man who sang anyway. A father who had nothing except the courage to be kind when no one was watching. He didn't sing for approval. He sang because silence wasn't an option anymore. Music swells faintly, low cello note, heartbeat rhythm. And maybe that's the invitation this story leaves behind. Not to perform louder, but to live truer. To speak when it matters. To help when it's inconvenient. To show up when everyone else turns away. Because even one small act of empathy, one moment of bravery, can change the temperature of an entire room. And sometimes, that's enough to change the world. Cinematic pause. The company that learned to listen. Voiceover. The building where it all began still stands downtown. Its lobby smells faintly of lemon polish and old echoes. If you walk through late at night, you'll see photos on the walls now. Employees, children, families, under a plaque that reads, "Every voice matters." No one tells the janitors to keep quiet anymore. In fact, on Fridays, the janitors lead the choir. The same board that once voted to fire Ben now funds scholarships for music teachers in public schools. And every spring, they host a concert called Songs from the Night Shift. No one forgets where the music came from. Soft smile in voice. Sometimes when the hall empties, you can almost hear the faint hum of that first lullaby under the floorboards. Like the building itself is still singing, still healing, still remembering the night it found its soul again. Emotional deepening. The sound of grace. Voiceover, low, slow, resonant. It's strange, isn't it? How the smallest sound can travel the farthest. A whisper from one tired man became a wave that touched strangers he'll never meet. A melody meant for one child became a lesson for millions. That's the thing about grace. It doesn't ask for permission. It just moves, quietly, steadily from heart to heart, until the silence runs out of places to hide. Piano arpeggio, hopeful, cinematic rise. And maybe that's what we're all doing in our own ways. Trying to find the sound that heals our rooms. Not with fame. Not with grand gestures, but with presence. The way Ben sang. The way Clara listened. The way Emma believed that sound could still travel through the dark. Because sometimes, love isn't loud. It's just consistent. A steady note held long enough for someone else to find harmony. Audience reflection. Your song. Music softens. Tone becomes conversational, closer to the mic, almost a whisper. So here's a question. If you could dedicate one song to someone you love, someone who helped you survive, or someone who still needs to hear they matter, what would it be? Drop it in the comments. Let the world see the sound you'd give, and tell us where you're listening from. Because even across oceans, across languages, across screens, we're all part of the same melody. Different notes, same song. Brief pause. Ambient sound of crowd clapping fades softly under voice. You don't have to have a perfect voice. You just have to have the courage to use it. That's how healing begins. Not in choirs, not in studios, but in moments when one person decides, "I'll sing anyway." Moral rap. What stories teach us? Voiceover warmer, teacher-like tone. Stories like this remind us that the smallest acts often echo the loudest. That empathy is louder than policy. That kindness, real kindness, doesn't always change headlines, but it always changes hearts. And in a world that teaches us to measure worth by noise, maybe it's time to honor the quiet ones. The ones who build, who comfort, who forgive, who sing softly enough for others to rest. Small swell strings shimmer, light percussion heartbeat tempo. So if this story reached you, if it reminded you of something you lost, or something you still believe in, or you take a breath, carry it forward. Be someone's quiet song. You'll never know how far the echo might travel. Final reflection. Echoes in the dark. Music lowers to a single piano and guitar duet. Slow cinematic fade-out tempo. Voiceover soft, reflective. Maybe the world doesn't need more noise. Maybe it just needs more harmony. Because the sound that healed the room wasn't flawless, it was human. It cracked. It wavered. It trembled with love. But it was real. And real always resonates. Pause. Tonight, if you find yourself alone in your own quiet room, remember that somewhere, someone is humming too. You might not hear them, but the universe does. And that's enough. Single guitar note. Same lullaby chord from section 9. Long and warm. Tell us where you're watching from, and one song you dedicate to someone you love. If this story reached you, subscribe and share your light. Because every story that's heard becomes someone else's courage. Soft outro logo appears, true stories that still sing. Music fades out with one final echo. The sound that healed the room.